Part 37. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 361. A green lantern was placed in front of the candlestick. There was a faint fragrance in the small inner room. Raindrops were hitting the windows in detail, and the building boats were rising and falling gently with the ripples on the lake. Xiao Xiang'er has bright makeup, a gold hairpin in her hair, and a long red dress that looks like a wedding dress. She is sitting upright in front of the dressing table, her eyes on the small wine bottle next to her, her expression slightly nervous. After working together for an hour, Chiao Yi secretly went to a pharmacy in Yueyang to buy some medicinal materials, and Zhongli Jiju's things were finally prepared. Zhongli Jiju is quite confident, but for this kind of thing, just knowing the formula won't work, and you won't know the effect unless you try it. In order not to make any mistakes and let Mrs. Lu find out that she was causing trouble, Xiao Xiang'er had no choice but to do it by herself. Xiao Xiang'er has some knowledge about medicine. Regardless of whether this small bottle of wine has the effect of making people confide in others, it definitely has the effect of boosting entertainment. As long as you drink it, tonight I'm afraid. Xiao Xiang'er tightened her red skirt tightly, and she was actually a little scared. After all, Su Buletinling, a reckless man, had all kinds of powerful methods, and the suffering he suffered was different every time. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Xiang'er stood up, walked to the bed and squatted down, took out the delicate little box and hid it at the bottom of the closet, feeling a little relieved. Tap tap tap. As the night got darker, footsteps finally sounded in the corridor of the building. Xiao Xiang'er sat up a little straighter and stood ready. The door opened, and Su Buring, who was wearing a white robe, walked into the back room. He glanced at the fragrant bedroom, and then focused his eyes on Xiao Xiang'er. He was obviously stunned for a moment, and then felt a little scared. What day is it today? Holidays, birthdays? None of them. 1 year anniversary? 1 year anniversary of having sex. It's not enough either. It's over, it's over. Gift, I didn't bring anything with me. If I had known, I would have bought candied haws on the street. Su Buletinling's stern face was filled with trembling fear, thinking about why Xiao Xiang'er suddenly put up such a fight. Xiao Xiang'er may have a clear conscience, but she is much more natural and generous. She leans on the dressing table and looks at the handsome man in front of her with a smile, and her voice is sweet. Brother Ling is back. To die, to die. Su Buling coughed slightly, feeling that it would be wrong to say too much, so he walked up to Xiao Xiang'er calmly, looked at her gently for a few times, then squatted down, stretched out his hand through Xiao Xiang'er's legs, trying to bully the baby into fainting. Ask again. Xiao Xiang'er raised her sapphire finger and pointed it on Su Buling's chest, biting her thin lips lightly, feeling a little embarrassed. Brother, don't worry. Can I not be in a hurry? What day is it today? With a smile on his lips, Su Buletinling picked up Xiao Xiang'er and sat down on the stool. He let her sit on his lap and wanted to gag her. Xiao Xiang'er naturally turned her head to avoid it. After this mouthful, it might be tomorrow morning when she wakes up. She gave Su Buling an angry look. Can't you talk to the baby? You went out to relax today, but I was bored in the room all day. Su Buling paid attention to Xiao Xiang'er's expression. After confirming that today was not a special day, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief and hugged her a little tighter. What does the baby want to say? Xiao Xiang'er leaned in Su Buling's arms and raised her beautiful face. Do you know what day it is today? Su Buling had no choice but to bite the bullet and show some doubts. I've been running around here and there lately, and I haven't paid attention. What day is it? With a smile on her face, Xiao Xiang'er raised her hand to pick up the small wine flask from the dressing table and poured 2 glasses of wine. At this time the year before last, when you came from Suzhou to the capital. Well. It's nothing, before I knew it, it's been so long. Yes, I was still the queen mother in the palace at that time. I thought about what was outside the wall all day long and didn't care about you. Hongluan was actually very nervous at the time. She came to the palace every day and asked me what to do. She didn't know how to take care of you. Child, who would have thought that what would happen next? While talking, Xiao Xianger handed the wine glass to Su Buling and picked up a glass himself. Su Buling actually felt a little like he was in another world. Unknowingly, he had been in this world for 2 years, and his memories had already merged, and he couldn't even tell which one was real. Raising his hand to take the wine glass, Su Buledenling brought it to his mouth and drank it all in one gulp. Yeah, looking back, it's quite dreamy. Xiao Xianger also drank a drink, then raised her hand and hooked Su Buling's neck, looking at his cheek. At that time, Hongluan ran to the palace every day, talking about what you had seen and heard since childhood, and how you were dumb and bad-tempered. I also advised her not to worry. At most, she was as dissatisfied as Xiao Ting, so I would never beat her. Sai, who would have thought that when you arrived in Chang'an, word spread all over the back house on Kuishao Street overnight just because of your appearance, and all the ladies were talking about it, but I didn't see you being silly and losing your temper. Then Hongluan started to sneer in front of me. Don't you know that those little eyes look like a gangster who picked up a beautiful wife for nothing? Su Buling shook his head and chuckled. Before I met Aunt Lu, I thought she was a noble lady. When we actually met, I found out she was a young woman. It was quite surprising. You are not as stupid as the rumors say. You know that Chang'an City is a dragon's pond and a tiger's den. Why do you come here without hesitation? Are you afraid that if you can't come, the emperor will be angry and harm the soldiers and people on both sides? I was really stupid at the time. If I had crossed over earlier, I would not have entered Chang'an even if I was beaten to death. Su Buling was speechless and couldn't explain, so he could only pretend. If I dare to enter Chang'an, I will be able to leave Chang'an, and I did it later. Xiao Xianger stared at Su Buling's face, thought for a while, bit her lower lip, and said softly. You are so sure that you dare to touch me, the current queen mother? Su Buling hugged her tighter. This is a matter for later. When I first entered the capital, I naturally didn't dare to have any ideas about Bao Bao. In fact, after entering Chang'an, I didn't notice that there was such a person as Bao Bao in the palace. His presence was too low. What he said was true. There was not much difference between Xiao Xianger, the queen mother, and not having her. The only important thing was the surname. Xiao Xianger put her cheek on Su Buling's shoulder and looked at his profile curiously. Su Buling, you said you couldn't write poetry when you first entered the palace. Obviously you wanted to keep your distance from me. The second time you entered the palace, you were very attentive. You must have found a way to detoxify. Then you approached me. Was it completely for a purpose, or, well, did you like me a little bit? Su Buling thought for a while. I must have had a purpose at the beginning. We just met and there is a huge gap in our status. How could I like you directly? Xiao Xianger pursed her lips, raised her hand and hit him on the shoulder, complaining in a delicate voice. Are you so utilitarian? Knowing that I can detoxify, you start acting. What about touching lips and writing poems are all fake? Just to make me give you my body. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 362. Su Buling sighed. In fact, if you want to detoxify, you can just find someone from the Xiao family's side branch. There are distinctions between legitimate and illegitimate people, but there is no blood relationship. I definitely didn't like her emotionally at the time, but I did like Bao Bao's appearance, so I didn't consider other people. Appearance is used to attract the opposite sex. Everyone loves beauty. I just fell in love with Bao Bao, and I took action for this, and I have a clear conscience. Xiao Xianger rubbed her slightly red cheeks. You not only want to detoxify, but also covet my beauty. Su Buling nodded generously. In fact, I coveted it as soon as we met, but I didn't consider it because of the difference in status. Detoxification is just an opportunity, which made me eat a bear heart and a leopard courage. Humph. Xiao Xianger narrowed her eyes slightly, raised her hand and poked Su Buling on the forehead. You have bad intentions. I thought you were a humble gentleman at first, but I didn't expect that you were targeting me as soon as we met. Say, your first sentence, the Queen Mother's the flowers are beautiful, does it have other meanings? Su Buling blinked and glanced down. I did think wrong at the time, but later I found that it was really beautiful and pleasing to the eye. Dash. Xiao Xianger showed some shame in her eyes, and straightened Su Buling's head. Pervert, you are hiding it very well. Those messy people know so much, and they have bullied many girls before, right? Which woman am I to you? Su Buling was a little helpless. The first one, there are only two in total. I am not the kind of man who only has girls' bodies in his mind. If I don't like them, I won't even look at them more. Xiao Xianger hesitated to speak, probably because she was afraid that Su Buling would think she was jealous, so she didn't ask who the other person was, and said. You just say it, but you are actually a pervert. You covet my beauty and let me detoxify you, just using me, not really loving me. I like it. I don't believe it. When did you fall in love with me? Su Buling thought about it and his expression became more serious. At first, I thought Bao Bao was just an ordinary beautiful woman who was also greedy for my beauty and deliberately approached me for mutual benefit. But I didn't expect that when Bao Bao detoxified me, she would prepare a pot of poisoned wine and exchange her life for mine. I fell in love with her completely at that time and felt guilty for a long time. In fact, I shouldn't be so anxious. I should take it slowly. Xiao Xianger blinked her almond eyes and was silent for a moment before whispering. You have a conscience. In fact, now that I think about it, I did covet your beauty at that time. What for the world, committing suicide after detoxification, are just excuses for myself. I didn't believe in your detoxification method at all at that time, and I could find a cousin or niece to try it first, but I never doubted the authenticity of the method, and even deliberately didn't think about other solutions. Method, there is only one thought in my heart that I dare not admit. I have been in the palace for 10 years, I have to live for myself, even if it is only for one day. I didn't realize it at the time, but now I realize that I did hold this thought at the time, and I have been deceiving myself all the time. Am I shameless and selfish? Su Buling's eyes were very serious. No, people should live for themselves, but when did the baby fall in love with me? Xiao Xianger stared into Su Buling's eyes. The first time you entered the palace, the first thing I saw was the little wood I carved, and I couldn't forget it after seeing it. Since then, I have been finding excuses to deceive myself, just to see you again. The overall situation of the world, status, etiquette, and rules, all became locks. Even if I had to use my life to break it, I didn't hesitate at all. The words were sincere, revealing the determination and willfulness of daring to love and hate. Su Buling took a breath, hugged her tighter, and smiled softly. I'm not as good as you, I owe you a favor. Xiao Xianger leaned on Su Buling's shoulder, raised her hand and stroked his cheek, thinking for a while. When I was detoxifying you, I always acted disgusted and repulsive, but it was all fake. I really like the way you bully people, you're particularly overbearing and unreasonable. I saw it a long time ago. I thought the baby was very strong, but after I found out, I was quite surprised. You're surprised? You're obviously happy. Do you also want to bully Hongluan like that? Su Buling thought for a while. Aunt Lu doesn't like that kind of tone. If she's too overbearing, she'll definitely beat me. I have to say soft words to please her. Xiao Xianger frowned and glanced at Su Buling with a little ridicule. You're quite skilled, but I know your nature. You must be greedy for Hongluan's beauty. Su Buling shook his head. Aunt Lu is different. When we first met, I encountered more things than I don't really want to contact Aunt Lu. Later, Aunt Lu came to visit every day, her words were gentle and caring, and gradually I treated her as a family member. I definitely like her, but there are not many family members in this world, so I cherish this feeling more, just like I would take you out of Chang'an even if the emperor was furious, even if it was reckless and irrational, I would do it. It's just my duty to care about the world, and you are the responsibility on my shoulders, the weight is different. Xiao Xiang raised her head and squinted slightly. What you said is really nice, then do you really treat Hongluan as an elder? Of course not. Su Buling blushed. Well, maybe more like a fiancé. You have to consider the other person's feelings when doing anything, so as not to accidentally lose it. Bao Bao is married, so he is more frank and direct, but I am not deliberately partial. Xiao Xiang nodded and leaned on his shoulder again. That's about right, you are together day and night, you have done a lot of bad things to Hongluan, right? Su Buling was a little helpless. How can you say that you are sorry? I just touched it a few times. Aunt Lu just pretended not to know. She still has the song "The Wind Lives in the Dust and the Fragrance Flowers Are Gone" that I gave her. In the middle of the night, I like to take it out and read it, and then call my name and rub it over and over. You know. I must know that. When I was in Chang'an, I was worried about my safety. I would often go there to take a look. Humph, you know people but not their hearts. You are a swindler. Did you do something outrageous when she was awake? One time I was really drunk. I pressed Aunt Lu down and rubbed her a few times. It was very rude. Her clothes were torn apart and were all stained with white flowers. Afterwards, she pretended not to know anything. If I hadn't discovered the belly band, she would have. I really thought it was a dream. Xiao Xiang bit her lower lip, leaned a little closer, and whispered. How does it feel? A little older than a baby. Huh. You're blind. It's obviously the same. Take a closer look. The difference is almost the same. It can't be seen with the naked eye, but I am very skilled in martial arts and my hands are relatively accurate. Can you have a woman's eye? I have compared it with her many times in private, and we even measured it with a cloth ruler. It's just the same. The night rain outside the window was rustling, and among the soft voices, the dim light on the window paper was extinguished without knowing when. The small wine bottle was empty when neither of them realized it. Xiao Xiang originally wanted to test the effect of Zhongli Jiju's recipe, but at this time, he had already forgotten about the end of the world. But I have to say, the effect is outstanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 363. The night is already deep, and the rain has not stopped yet. Most of the shops in the back alleys of the market are closed. In the dim rain curtain, two lanterns hanging under the eaves shine with a dim light, reflecting a Yang character. On a rainy night in late autumn, there were no customers on the road. Meng Hua, the proprietress, had tidied up the inside and outside of the shop and stood under the eaves, looking at the entrance to the back alley. The little girl might be a little tired. She stood beside her rubbing her eyes and muttered. That chubby sister today is so awesome. She has been to the capital and worked as a police officer. I'm not fat. You don't look fat, but why are your chests bulgier than your mother's? The big braided sister next to you is average. You will know when you grow up. While the mother and daughter were chatting, footsteps appeared in the alley. Three men who worked in the escort office, holding lanterns and oil paper umbrellas, walked over while chatting. The leader was Yang Tuyu, who had been in contact with Chang Shijian in the afternoon. Arriving in front of the shop, The two escorts called sister-in-law kindly. After Yang Tuyu said goodbye, he put away his umbrella under the eaves and raised his hands to rub his daughter's head. Meng Hua stepped forward to catch the umbrella and straightened her husband's robe that was splashed with rainwater. "Ms. Sir, why are you back so late?" "Yes, a few out-of-town guests came today. They were so generous and ordered all the dishes. Something happened at the escort agency. We went out to have a few drinks." Yang Yuyu put down her belt knife and sat down at the table by the window, with food still on it. The family of three sat together. Meng Hua served the food and looked at her husband. "But the people from the boat gang drag my husband to do big things again. Alas, the boat gang can't go there. The sons of several families in the alley went to hang out with the boat gang. It's easy to earn money by traveling around, but if you don't say it, it's really gone. This small shop, the daily harvest, is enough for family expenses. Maybe all the wives in the world like to be verbose, but the little girl next to me has listened to it many times, covering her ears and pouting." Yang Tuyu shook his head and said calmly, "Don't think blindly. Speaking of it, the boat gang is also escorting escorts. It is not much different from what I am doing now. I run wherever I go." Meng Hua nodded, sat between her husband and daughter, and said with a smile, "The escort agencies are all running around, and they come back in 2 or 3 days. The boat gangs leave for as little as 3 months to half a year. Moreover, I heard from guests traveling from north to south that it is very dangerous to run boats. There are many bandits in the rivers and lakes. If you don't meet them, you can't do it well. When a ship is hijacked, in order not to be discovered, we kill people ship by ship." Snap! Yang Tuyu slapped her chopsticks on the table and looked at her daughter next to her. "Girl, here, the customers in the store don't know anything. They are all empty talk. Don't listen to me anymore. If I don't go to the boat gang, I will stay in Yueyang. Save the girl's dowry." The little girl chuckled, "When can I get married? Today I met a brother who is so handsome, much more handsome than my father." "You girl, how can you be as handsome as your father?" "Oh, the girl has grown up." There was a light like a bean in the window, and with the little girl's jokes, the laughter of the small door came into the rain curtain just like in the past. Su Buling's first day in Yueyang ended so peacefully. The next morning, the east turned white, but the rain did not stop. On the boat by the lake, the palace guards began to change shifts. The maids who got up early were lighting a fire in the kitchen and making breakfast. The girls in each room had not yet gotten up. At this time in the past, the first person to wake up would be Ning Yuhi, a Taoist priest. However, last night, Ning Yuhi had been busy taking care of Xiao Manzi, who was rolling drunkenly on the bed and insisting on listening to stories for half the night, and had not yet woken up. Xiao Xiang who had been suffering from insomnia all year round in the palace and was used to getting up late, was the first to get up today and stood on the terrace behind the building to think about life. The cold wind in the late autumn morning blew my long hair, and the light mist and rain made the Dongting lake look hazy and ethereal, like a dream. Xiao Xiang held the railing with her hands and gently rubbed her sore legs, with a bit of embarrassment in her seductive eyes. "What happened last night? What did I say?" Xiao Xiang bit her lower lip from time to time and looked back, a little afraid to enter the house. "Yesterday, she took the medicine prepared by Zhongli Jiju and drank it with Su Buring in order to try out the effect. From the experience point of view, she didn't notice that the medicine had any effect, and she didn't even feel anything. But judging from the effect, it was obviously amazing. She shook out all the words in her heart, such as falling in love at first sight, being domineering, and detoxification are all excuses. What should she say? How could Xiao Xiang be such a shameless woman? But she just said it, and she remembered it clearly. She felt like she had no idea what she was saying at that time. She just wanted to talk, wanted to pour out what was in her heart, and tell the person she loved the most, hoping to be recognized and satisfied, and hoping to see the other person. The look of emotion in the eyes. That's all. Anyway, what I said was the truth, but it was a bit disgusting. But in the end, when I got under the quilt, what I said was too much. As long as my brother likes it, I can do it anywhere. Brother Ling is God, the baby doesn't want anything, just don't leave me and be satisfied. Bah! He thinks beautifully. Xiao Xiang frowned. She never thought that she was that kind of stupid woman. She was the legitimate daughter of the Xiao family in Huainan. How could she be controlled by a man? There seems to be something wrong with this medicine. She can't take it in the future. Here Hongluan is pretty much the same. But Su Buletin Ling must have remembered it. What should I do with this joke? Murder your husband? Definitely not. By the way, pretend to be dizzy, just say you don't remember, it's not the first time anyway, there was no written evidence last night, what can you do to me? Xiao Xiang just thought like this, her expression kept changing, and she slowly calmed down. In the back room of the bedroom, the candle on the dressing table had been burned out. It was not bright yet, and the light was still dim. Su Buling was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his forehead with both hands, in the same posture as if he had accidentally bumped into Miss Xiao. What the hell? Su Buling's stern eyes were filled with confusion and his brows were furrowed, thinking about what happened last night. The nature of food and sex also begins with emotions and ends with etiquette. Su Buling never considers himself a gentleman, but he still attaches great importance to etiquette. The biggest difference between humans and animals is to control nature and desires, that is, self-cultivation, and the so-called ritual is a way to control nature and desires. Reflect. But last night, Su Buling was obviously rude. First, he couldn't control his mouth. He said whatever he should and shouldn't say, and nothing more than disgusting words. He even touched Aunt Lu several times and she shook her head. She also talked about a lot of nonsense, including airplanes, cannons, televisions, and self-proclaimed, Northwest Wild Teddy. Su Buling's cold brows were full of hopelessness. He was just thinking nonsense, how could he say it out loud? How to explain when the baby asks? Looking at the wine bottle next to him, Su Buling narrowed his eyes slightly. How about pretending to be drunk? How could you possibly get drunk after just ordering so much wine? By the way, I drank a lot in the shop yesterday. Tread. While Su Buling was thinking, Xiao Xiang walked into the house from the terrace. When she discovered that Su Buling was awake, Xiao Xiang's troubled face froze slightly, and she quickly put on a dignified posture and said softly, "Are you awake so early?" Su Buling rubbed his forehead with a smile on his face. "I drank too much outside yesterday and my head hurts. Was I drunk and talking nonsense last night?" Xiao Xiang blinked her beautiful eyes, walked over and sat down, raised her hand to help press Su Buling's temples. "It's not nonsense. It was pretty good at first, then you picked me up and I fainted and can't remember." "Oh." Su Buling secretly breathed a sigh of relief and returned to his usual stern look, with a bit of a smile. "It's still early and it's raining again. Let's get some sleep." Xiao Xiang lifted the quilt, lay down on Su Buling's arm, and secretly glanced at the small wine bottle. The wind and rain outside the window are still there, and what happened last night seems to have never happened. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 364. It was bright, the rain was still falling on Dongting Lake, and the boat was bustling. It was a very ordinary morning in the long journey, but the atmosphere was slightly different. Zhu Manzi drank too much yesterday and was hiding in the house thinking about who carried her back yesterday. She hadn't figured it out yet, so her face was always red. Su Buling didn't know if he drank too much yesterday, but he was definitely drunk. Although it was not a big deal, he felt a little embarrassed. When he had breakfast with Xiang his hands under the table were much calmer. Xiang had been bullied so many times that she had already figured out the nature of her stinky brother. She was not surprised by his shameless appearance last night, and naturally didn't mind. At this moment, she was thinking about how to use Zhonglijiju's medicine. As for what she said in a daze last night, she had long since chosen to forget it. In addition, Zhonglijuju, who spent a lot of effort to prepare the medicine yesterday, also had a strange expression. Zhonglijuju was an expert in medicine with extremely high attainments. He was naturally interested in this aspect and paid great attention to what he prepared. After getting up early in the morning, she walked around in the corridor and secretly looked at Su Buling's expression. It's a pity that when Su Buling puts on his clothes, he always looks cold, extraordinary, gentle, and elegant. Almost no one can see his thoughts from his face. Xiao Xiang'er has been the queen mother for 10 years. It is a basic skill to not show her emotions. She can't see anything. The purpose of this trip is Jiangnan. They have to go to Yuelu Mountain and can't stay for long. After dinner, Su Buling and Ning Yuhi Manzi got off the boat and went to Junshan Island across the lake to inquire about Ning Qingyi's news. It was still raining in the sky, and Mrs. Lu couldn't go out to play, so she spent her time embroidering in her boudoir. Mrs. Lu lived in Su Buling's room, which was quite spacious. The half-finished robe was placed on the table. Mrs. Lu and Yunu were discussing the decorative patterns. Mrs. Lu was obviously a very traditional woman. In Chang'an, Su Buling was the only one around him. She was really meticulous and would get jealous. But since Su Buling had more women around him, Mrs. Lu realized that Su Buling was not the child she imagined. He had grown up long ago and had his own life and friends. He no longer needed anyone to nag him, and he might never have needed anyone to nag him. After thinking it through, Mrs. Lu did not say a word. In the past, if she did not see Su Buling for 3 days, she would ask the imperial guards to search the city. But now, if she did not see Su Buling for many days, she would just stand at the window and look at him. When she came back, she would not ask, "Where did you go? What did you do?" It was not that Mrs. Lu had changed. She was still jealous and wanted to know what Su Buling did and where he went every day, but now she kept all of this in her heart and did not show it. Just like the wives of those wealthy families, they knew how to be measured and restrained. They did not care about what they should not care about, and did not ask what they should not ask. Women who were too self-righteous would not have a good end. Even Xiao Xiang'er, who had been the queen mother, knew this truth. As for whether she is happy now, Mrs. Lu has never thought about it. Maybe as long as Su Buling is happy, she will be happy. There is only Su Buling in her world. Why bother to care about family affection or love between men and women? Why bother to compete with other women to see who has more or less? As long as they are together in peace and not separated, they will be satisfied. It was drizzling outside the window. Mrs. Lu, wearing a dark green autumn skirt, was holding needlework and imagining the new robe in her hand on Su Buling's body. Suddenly, footsteps sounded at the door, and then knocked on the door. Dong dong. Mrs. Lu turned around and saw Xiao Xiang'er pushed open the door and walked in, holding a small food box in her hand. Xiang'er, if you are not pounding medicine, what are you doing here? I am a little tired, come and sit down. Xiao Xiang'er looked calm and lazy. She walked slowly to the table and sat down, put down the food box, and took the cloth being cut from Yunu. Yunu knew that the two sisters were chatting openly in private, and she had no intention of eavesdropping. She smiled and stood up and closed the door. Madame Lu took the needle and thread and glanced at Xiao Xiang'er. Did you detoxify Linger again last night? Don't force yourself, do you want to lie down? Xiao Xiang'er didn't care about this joke at all, but sighed faintly, looking like she wanted to say something but stopped. Madame Lu didn't wait for Xiao Xiang'er to blush and get angry, but waited for a sigh. She couldn't help but frown slightly, hesitated for a while, put down the needle and thread, and moved the stool to Xiao Xiang'er's side. Xiang'er, what's wrong? Xiao Xiang'er pursed her lips and shook her head. Nothing, my private affairs with Su Buling have nothing to do with you. This sentence stabbed Madame Lu's heart meaninglessly. Madame Lu and Su Buling have always been close. Whether they met or lived together, she was the first. She and Xiao Xiang'er are also best friends who can talk about anything. The two of them have never had any secrets, and they have even talked about things in the bedroom in private. Now that Su Buling and Xiao Xiang'er are together, they should be closer and talk about everything, but she has become an outsider. Your private affairs with Ling have nothing to do with me. Mrs. Lu's eyes turned red in an instant, and her hands tightly grasped her skirt. After thinking for a while, she did not show her usual sour look, but smiled slightly awkwardly, lowered her head and picked up the needle and thread, and did not ask any more questions. Xiao Xiang'er seemed to realize that her words hurt people, and hurriedly explained, I don't mean that, well, it's just hard to say, it's hard to say. Mrs. Lu bit her lower lip, raised her eyes and glanced at Xiao Xiang'er, and smiled gently, really? Really, don't think nonsense. We never talk about anything. I even told you what the foxtail does. I didn't mean to hide it from you. It's just. Xiao Xiang'er looked a little anxious, as if to comfort her best sister, she kept explaining what she just said. The two most important people in Mrs. Lu's heart, apart from Su Buling, were her only friend Xiao Xiang'er. Seeing that Xiao Xiang'er looked so abnormal, as if it was really difficult to speak, she temporarily wiped away the disappointment in her heart. He frowned and said, Did your child quarrel with you? Or did he hit you? No. Xiao Xiang'er sat a little closer, with a hint of helplessness in her eyes. Forget it, I'd better tell you directly. Don't turn around and tell Su Buring, he will talk about me. Mrs. Lu's face became a little more serious. She sat up straight and nodded seriously, speak directly if you have something to say. If your son is really wrong, I will not favor him. Xiao Xiang'er's eyes were a little tangled and she said, Don't let him, he is too stubborn. I am afraid that he will lose his essence and blood, so I prepared some things for him to nourish the kidneys, strengthen the energy, replenish qi, and generate blood. No matter how good a man's body is, there is a limit. A little maintenance is what he should do. But he thought that only old men who couldn't get up ate these. As soon as I said that, he thought I was the one who said he couldn't do it, and he made me so angry. Well. Mrs. Lu's face turned red and she looked around. Your child, do you still need these? Naturally Xiao Xiang'er opened the food box and took out the small wine bottle inside. It's just something to nourish the body, and it's not harmful at all. I made a lot of effort with Miss Zhongli to get it. His current body is okay, but what to do in 10 years? If you don't take care of yourself now, you will think about it when something goes wrong, but it will be too late. It's not like you haven't heard of the lady on Kuishao Street who worked hard to replenish her husband's health. Mrs. Lu thought carefully and nodded slightly, it makes sense, but your child doesn't seem to be the kind of person who cares about face. How could you refuse your kind offer? Xiao Xiang'er sighed, it depends on who is right. If you tell him, he will listen to everything. Su Buling and I are in a detoxification relationship. He will naturally not admit it. If you don't believe it, ask Miss Zhongli to talk to him. Try this. Do you think he is angry? Maybe he will execute Miss Zhongli on the spot to prove it. Mrs. Lu thought about it for a while and thought it was true. She picked up the small wine bottle and looked at it. You want me to persuade him? But how can I, an aunt, say anything about this kind of thing? Xiao Xiang'er frowned slightly, it's not an unclean thing. It's just to warm and nourish the body. You can drink it too. In the evening, you invite him to the house to have a meal together and talk about family issues, and then we finish the drink. Mrs. Lu was not stupid. She thought for a moment and looked at Xiao Xiang. If that's all, you can just prepare 2 glasses of wine in the evening. Why let me come? Are you hiding something from me? Xiao Xiang blinked, shook his head and said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't tell him at all. If he finds out, he won't laugh to death. You are his aunt. Even if he finds out, it's okay for his own good, he can understand. Mrs. Lu suddenly realized and said lightly, you have been doing it for a long time just for this? After going around for so long, I thought it was such a big deal. Xiao Xiang glared slightly, will it work? If not, forget it. I'll drink it myself. I got it with great difficulty. It can also help with beauty. It's a pity that it's cheap for you. Mrs. Lu took the bottle in her hand, looked at it for a few times, and nodded gently, it's a small effort. You asked me to ask for it? How can I refuse? Anyway, I haven't had dinner with your child for a long time. I want to help you. Xiao Xiang secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, don't tell others. If Su Buletinling finds out and the maid hears that we are worrying about this matter, she will laugh at us secretly. Mrs. Lu put the small wine bottle on the table, I know, Luo Li, please. He. Xiao Xiang's eyebrows were curved, he looked at Mrs. Lu for a few times, and then said, Hongluan, your outfit is a bit tacky. Mrs. Lu looked down and said, you're not going out on the boat, so why are you dressing up so grandly? Well, I just learned a new hair accessory. It's raining and I can't go out anyway. Let me practice and dress you up. With that said, without waiting for Mrs. Lu's consent, Xiao Xiang stood up, ran back to the room and brought over a set of extremely coquettish dresses. I wish Kittian's author Yu Mengji you a happy wedding and a happy marriage, the prince is very fierce author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 365. Taking a ferry, we arrived at Junction Island, which is far away from Yueyang Tower. Su Buling got off the boat and looked at the big square behind the ferry, feeling a little disappointed. Before the CAO family on Junction Island retired, they had a great status and reputation in the world. At the most powerful time in history, the 72 peaks and 72 heroes supported half of the world with the strength of one family. The object of wooing by the vassal states. As the troubled times subsided, large and small countries gradually encroached and annexed. The strength of the imperial power inevitably suppressed the aristocratic class headed by Jianghu forces and clans, and the aristocratic families that could control the world's trends disappeared. Even so, in the central plains where martial arts is prevalent, Jianghu forces such as the Cao family on Junction Island still have unparalleled dominance. Sometimes the laws and orders of the court are not as effective as the words of the Jianghu boss. For example, if people are allowed to sell illegal salt around Dongting Lake, the desperate merchants will not pay attention to it. However, the Cao family does not allow illegal salt to be sold. No ship in Dongting Lake in the 800 miles dares to transport illegal salt. This is the rule of the river and lake. But in fact, the Cao family will not cut off the Jianghu people's wealth at all, and will even protect them. It is precisely because of this that Zuluko and other Jianghu aristocratic families were also taken advantage of during Tai Ying's deer hunting period. Today's Junction Island does not have the scene of swordsmen all over the place like in the books. The Zhejiang Pavilion where weapons are stored at the entrance of the square has been converted into a local specialty shop, and the houses where people live in Jianghu have also been turned into markets. Perhaps the only remaining building that retains the grandeur of the Cao family's heyday is a coiled dragon wall at the end of the square. It is 10 feet long from left to right and 3 feet tall. Looking at it through the rain, it looks like a dragon entrenched in the 800 miles of Dongting. Inside, We are about to ride on the wind. It's a pity that this dragon wall, which symbolizes the dragon lurking in the abyss, is also hung with fishing nets at this time. Su Buling was walking on the wide road outside the square holding an oil paper umbrella. He could vaguely see the traces of swords accumulated on the ground for hundreds of years. However, only Lifu, who was pushing a cart in the rain and standing at the door, were left on the roadside to watch. The shopkeeper looked sad at the weather. Ningyu, he held a white oil paper umbrella, walked beside Su Buling, and sighed quietly. When I fled to Chudi, it was still very lively here. The use of force was not allowed on the island. Street gangs and Jianghu forces discussed matters here. The stage in the middle was originally a martial arts competition stage. There was an annual martial arts conference, and Chudi's the dream of young heroes is to fight there. Kingsu Jinren, Chendeazai, Sidu Yuejin, etc. have all shown their faces there before. The Baichi Cliff of Luya in the East China Sea, the Ghost Gate of Fenglingdu, the Zhu family's Sword Gate is a similar place, but it's a pity that it's gone now. Ningyu, he was born in a family of martial arts and grew up in the martial arts world. He has a deep affection for the martial arts. It is this inexplicable flavor of the martial arts that young martial artists are still looking for. Just like Zhu Manzi hiding under Su Buling's umbrella, he sighed in despair. Last time I came here, I specifically followed the storyteller's instructions and stored the sword in the Jijian pavilion, but it turned out that it was full of crabs and dry goods. I was also wondering how crabs can hit people, and it can't be done with crab claws. Nightingale, walking next to her, looked a little confused. You can't see the big sign outside? Just telling a joke. Su Buling shook his head and smiled, stopped Xiao Manzi from making jokes, and looked at the 72 peaks of Junshan ahead. Okay, let's start working. We will split up and meet on the boat in the evening. Zhu Manzi had worked as a police officer, catching thieves every day, and was very good at finding people. So he and Nightingale entered the market with 4 retainers from the palace, and went from door to door to inquire about information. Junshan Island is very big, and it would definitely not be easy for just a few people to ask around and find a master of martial arts who comes and goes without a trace. Su Buling's method was more direct, and he and Ningyu went directly to the Cao family ancestor located deep in Junshan Island. Home. In the early morning rain, Su Buling and Ningyu were walking side by side. Seeing that Su Buling was about to go directly to ask the Cao family, Ningyu, he walked in front and softly dissuaded. Your Majesty, the Cao family has sealed its sword and retreated from the world. It is not a good idea to come here rashly. Ningyu, he came to inquire last time, but he didn't go to Cao's house to visit. It was not unexpected, but inappropriate. Quitting the world is not just as simple as a sentence. It is easy to stop fighting and killing, but it is difficult to cut off the inextricable connections with various forces. Just like the officialdom, if a court official retires and returns to his hometown and no longer handles official duties, it is not considered leaving the officialdom. As long as his influence is still there, his disciples and colleagues are still in the officialdom, and as long as he can still speak out, he is not considered to have quit the court. In fact, no one can quit at all. The same goes for withdrawing from the arena. The higher you go, the harder it is to escape. As long as you still have influence in the arena, and someone listens to your words and gives you face, then he is a member of the arena. Let alone sealing the sword, you can use your own hands. Cutting it off won't change this fact. This is why there are very few Jianghu people who can turn back, and all those who quit are hiding in the mountains and forests incognito. The Cao family withdrew from the world in a very pure way. They closed their doors and cut off all exchanges in the world. If anyone heard what they said, they would not say anything. They paid taxes on time and went to the government if anything happened. Even the way to support the family was changed. Farm and sell crabs. Master and apprentice Ningyu, he are from Jianghu. Even if they are just asking for news, it is a Jianghu matter. Ningyu he obviously does not want to embarrass the Cao family. Su Buling understood what Ningyu he meant. If you spend one day in the underworld, you will remain in the underworld for the rest of your life. He chuckled at this, shook his head and said, I'm not a Jianghu person. The dignified Prince Su, went to people's homes for on-the-spot inspections to see how the harvest was this year and to express my condolences to the folks. Do you have any questions? Well. Ningyu was stunned for a moment and thought carefully, is there such a thing as this? You are the crown prince of Su, and you came to King Chu's territory to express condolences to the villagers. It seems that you have crossed the line. Su Buling shook his head, the rules of the rivers and lakes and the court are different. King Su and King Chu are all kings. The biggest one in the world is the emperor. We are all ministers. As long as we are within the territory of Daewoo, I will run away. Let's see if the truth is justified. We can find evidence that the king of Chu raped the daughters of the people. We can also write a book about the king of Chu, and the Yashitai will impeach the king of Chu. Ningyu he was a little confused. The king of Chu is a prince, so is it considered a problem to rob civilian girls? Su Buling shrugged his shoulders, even if it is really revealed, and the matter is not small, if King Su really wants to sue the officials and accuse King Chu of raping the daughters of the people, the emperor really has to punish him severely, otherwise it will be difficult to silence the people. Of course, this kind of thing cannot happen in a peaceful world, and it is even less likely in a troubled world. Ningyu he was thoughtful, thought for a moment, and looked up at Su Buling. What if we find evidence that the king of Chu raped a daughter of the people, will you care? It was a simple question that was almost joking, but the meaning behind it was profound. Su Buling fell silent and walked on the stone path in the rain. After thinking for a long time, he said softly, if I were a knight, I would definitely seek justice for that girl when I saw injustice on the road, even if the opponent was invincible. As the crown prince of Su, for the sake of the overall situation, I cannot offend the king of Chu for such a trivial matter. Ningyu he walked under Su Buling's umbrella, raised his eyes and looked at the side face that he always valued very seriously. Which one will your daughter choose? Su Buling finally had a modern memory. He held the oil paper umbrella and thought carefully for a long time before saying softly, do your best within your ability. This sentence may have a sense of justice and is morally impeccable, but as Lao Xiao said, this is the way of chivalry, not the way of kings. As a powerful prince, this choice was consistent with his conscience but not his status. However, Ningyu he grew up in Jianghu, and he has been practicing chivalry since childhood, so there is obviously a little more smile and admiration in his eyes. I'm so sorry. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 366. Arriving at Kajia's Wang Deep in Juncheon Island, Su Buling informed the steward of the Cao family of his identity, and naturally reported that he was Prince of Suwang instead of Su Buling of Suzhou Prefecture. If there were no identity in the underworld, the Cao family would strictly speaking be just a country gentry, and one could imagine how big the gap between them and the princes was. The steward who stopped them was confused, and after hesitating for a moment, he still respectfully welcomed Su Buling and the guard Ningyu he into the Cao family ancestral home. Su Buling and Ningyu he sat in the living room, looking at the high walls and tiles of the Cao family mansion. They had seen a lot of them along the way, but the weapon racks, plum blossom piles and other objects commonly used in martial arts disappeared without a trace. The elderly Cao family members could still see the foundation of martial arts from their footsteps and breathing, but the children had no foundation at all, which showed how thoroughly the Cao family withdrew from the underworld. As a large family with hundreds of years of inheritance, the Cao family still has a large population. The houses in the manor are connected in a row, and there are no less than 1,000 people living there. There is also a school built, where an old teacher teaches. The sound of reading can be heard in the rain from afar. Su Buling held the teacup and waited quietly for a moment. The Cao family, who heard the news, hurried to the living room. The leader was an old man dressed as a clerk. He looked relatively wealthy. He bowed and saluted as soon as he entered the door. "I, Cao Kui, pay my respects to the Prince of Suwang." Ning Yu he was shocked when he heard the name. He didn't expect that the second in command of the Cao family of Junshan Island would show up directly. The Cao family is still famous in the world. It is a behemoth that all the Jianghu people can hardly compare to. Cao Kui, who was responsible for contacting people from all directions, is the external face of the Cao family. Those who can be on the same stage with him are all the helmsmen of major families and sections. Tang Jiao had to perform the etiquette of a junior when he met him. It is self-evident how high his status in the world is. It is true that Ning Yu he is very skilled in martial arts, but in terms of status in the martial arts world, she is just a little Taoist priest seeking shelter under Wudane Mountain, with no prestige or qualifications. In terms of family background, she is Tang Jiao's daughter, not as tall as Zhu Manzi, who has a sword saint father. Not to mention in terms of age, she can only be regarded as the same generation as Cao Kui's granddaughter, and is not a heavyweight at all. Seeing the second in command of the Cao family, whom he had only heard of in rumors, Ning Yu he stood up and bowed earnestly. "Junior Ning Yu he, meeting Mr. Cao." Su Buling sat on the chair without getting up, raised his hand to indicate the host's seat next to him. "Mr. Cao, no need to be polite, I was passing by Yueyang and just came to take a look." Cao Kui had gray hair and looked relatively wealthy, looking more like a businessman. He walked to the host's seat and sat down, smiling and politely said, "The prince came to my humble home, which really makes me flattered. I have asked my wife to prepare a banquet. I will invite the prefect to welcome the prince later." The words were enthusiastic, even a bit flattering, making it hard to imagine that the chubby old man in front of him was the Cao family boss who once dominated the world. Su Buling smiled calmly and raised his hand gently. "We came to Yueyang lightly. It's too much to invite the prefect. Mr. Cao doesn't need to spend so much money." Cao Kui stroked his beard and nodded. "I have seen the reputation of General Su with my own eyes. When I was only 7 or 8 years old, General Su led his troops to the south and passed through Yueyang. I was fortunate to go to pay a visit once. It has been more than 60 years. Very skilled in chatting, Su Buling did not lose manners and talked in a friendly manner. Ning Yu sat beside him in a proper manner. It was really hard to treat Cao Kui as an ordinary official. It was just like treating eunuch Jia as a little eunuch with no status. As long as you know the identity, you can't sit still, so you haven't spoken. After Cao Kui said a few words, he respectfully asked the two about their purpose. Su Buling smiled. "I made a friend in Chang'an, named Ning Qingyi. He went to Yueyang for a trip a few days ago and lost contact. There is no news from the government, so I want to ask Cao Yuanwei if he has seen him." Knowing that the Cao family does not want to be involved in the affairs of the underworld, this sentence is completely said as an ordinary citizen, which can be said to be very considerate of the Cao family. Cao Kui obviously knew what Su Buling was thinking, and did not hesitate. He shook his head and said, "Your Highness, I think you know that the Cao family used to be in the underworld, but they retired 10 years ago and no longer ask about the affairs of the underworld. A few days ago, a girl named Ning came over. She was quite straightforward and said that bandits had targeted the Cao family and wanted to be their guard. Cao naturally refused at the time, and the girl never came again, but appeared a few times in the market." Hearing this, Ningyu he knew it was true and did not hide it, because it was in line with Ning Qingyi's style of doing things. Ning Qingyi grew up in a Taoist temple since he was a child. He did not learn much about the ways of the world and was quite straightforward. Just like when he found out that old man Sun's silver was stolen by San K in Qingxi Lane, he paid out of his own pocket to leave it to old man Sunday. He did nothing wrong out of kindness, but he was too direct and did not consider whether manager Sun would accept it. Ning Qingyi was brought up by Ning Yuhi, and he knew her personality very well. She must have heard about the CAO family's affairs, so she knocked on the door and said that the CAO family was in trouble and she wanted to help. Naturally, the CAO family would not agree. Since Ning Qingyi really came to the CAO family, she must not have left. She was probably waiting nearby to help the CAO family. After Ning Yuhi learned about this situation, he glanced at Su Buling and signaled that he could leave. But Su Buling did not mean to get up. After hearing Cao Kui's answer, he smiled and said, "I also heard that there is a group of bandits in the city who have set their sights on the Cao family. It seems not simple." Cao Kui sighed and glanced at the Cao family mansion. The big tree attracts the wind, so some family members will naturally be targeted. Don't worry, the prince has already reported it to the official. Lord's his who has sent a lot of detectives here. I think everything will be fine. This is the most normal thing for ordinary people to do. The Cao family did report to the government, and the Yamen actually sent a few police officers over. But this obviously has no meaning at all. Not to mention the few trembling patrol agents in Zhuangzi. Even if 1,000 troops are mobilized to guard, Zulu will still kill whoever he wants, not counting the other masters of Eagle Tower. Su Buling knew that the person coming was Zulu and that the Cao family was in danger. He thought for a moment and said softly, "I heard that the thieves are not ordinary. How did Mr. Cao get into trouble with these gangsters?" As the second head of the Cao family, Cao Kui was extremely thoughtful and naturally understood the meaning of these words. "I know who the person is and how you offended Dainglu." Cao Kui's smile softened slightly and he thought for a moment. "Haha, no matter who comes, a bunch of ordinary people in the Cao family can't afford a knife and have to rely on the government. As for how to offend a gangster, it's hard to say. My eldest nephew works as an errand in the Yamen and he was arrested. Many bandits have naturally offended many people. The prince is very fierce." Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 367. Ning Yuhi was obviously surprised when he heard Cao Kui's words. The rivers and lakes are the rivers and lakes, and they have always drawn a clear line with the imperial court. Those who seek refuge with the imperial court are regarded as hawks. Many Jianghu people who follow the rules are caught by the imperial court. Not to mention betraying their brothers, they do not even tell a word about their opponents. The Cao family has a transcendent status in the world, so they must respect the rules of the world, otherwise they will not be able to convince the public. It is possible to work as a retainer for officials, princes, and princes. This is what people in the world rely on to make a living. Being an official directly would break the rules. It's like if your elder brother is the county magistrate and your younger brother commits murder and arson in the county, he won't be able to pass the court, let alone the world based on integrity. The fact that Ning Yuhi was so surprised showed that very few people knew about this matter. Su Buling thought for a moment and continued to ask, "Which Yamen does your nephew work as an errand in?" Cao Kui picked up the teacup and took a sip. He thought for a long time and shook his head. "My nephew was kicked out of the house 10 years ago and his surname was changed to Song Ying. The prince must have heard of it." Iron Judge Song Ying. Ning Yuhi was slightly stunned when he heard the name. Su Buling frowned lightly. Song Ying had naturally heard of him. Among the 3 chief officers of the Criminal Investigation Department, Zhang Xiang was the external face, and his main responsibility was to take the blame for the emperor and sit in charge of the records library. Lao Yi controlled the intelligence organization. Hidden in the dark all year round, are the emperor's eyes and ears. And there is another one who walks around the world and shocks the world. He is the emperor's extended hands and feet, and his name is Song Ying. In the world of Daewoo, there are many proud men like Situ Yuejin, Chen Daozai, Zulu, Li Hansheng, etc. on the surface. There are even more old bastards hidden secretly. The thugs used by the court to intimidate the world are as low as you must not be afraid of these people. Song Ying's origin is relatively mysterious. Iron Eagle quietly appeared after hunting a deer and led the wolf guards to hunt down important criminals in the Jianghu. As long as he found the person, there was basically no way to escape. His on-the-spot execution methods were more ruthless than those in the Jianghu, so he was called the Iron Judge. Song Ying didn't kill many people, after all, there weren't many people he could catch personally, but the heads of more than a dozen gangsters were enough to make Song Ying famous in the world and make people talk about it. Su Buling has been staying in Chang'an and has never met Song Ying. The information he got is only a few words. There is no information about his appearance, let alone his origin. Naturally, I was a little surprised to hear that Song Ying was from the Cao family on Junshan Island. But after hearing the news, Su Buling understood why the Cao family suddenly withdrew from the world. Song Ying is the head of the Criminal Investigation Department, and the people he kills are Jianghu people. The Cao family is highly respected in Jianghu, so the two obviously cannot coexist. According to the rules of Jianghu people, they have to clean up the family. But the Cao family obviously can't clean up a person of Song Ying's level, and the Cao family's successful retreat from the Iron Eagle deer hunting without being affected may have something to do with Song Ying. No wonder Daenglu came to deal with the Cao family. With such a relationship, it would be moral to not exterminate the Cao family. Su Buletin could think of it, and Ning Yuhi naturally thought of it too, and the respect in his eyes faded a bit. After all, compared to the Lu and Zhu families, who would rather bend than bend, the Cao and Tang families' behavior of seeking perfection through compromise was really shameful. The Cao family took the lead in hunting down their friends in the world to seek perfection, which was even more outrageous. Cao Kui was the head of the Cao family, and his eyesight was absolutely ruthless. Naturally, he saw what they were thinking, shook his head and sighed. This is a private matter of the Cao family. Prince, please come back. Su Buling smiled a little. He was not from Jianghu, so naturally he didn't feel the same contempt as Ning Yuhi. At most, he felt that the Cao family was unkind. However, he heard Master Kingxiu say that Ning Qingyi was saved by Cao Kujian, the head of the Cao family, who secretly went to Wudane Mountain to ask for talents. Master Kingxiu also spoke well of him, and he couldn't see clearly the Cao family just because of a few words. Maybe the situation at that time it's more complicated. After getting clues about Ning Qingyi, there was a reason why the Cao family was targeted by Daenglu. After Su Buling got a little understanding, he didn't stay long and stood up to leave. But before leaving, Su Buling still warned. There are so many old, young, women and children in the village, so you and Cao should be more careful. There are some insignificant things, just give them as long as they are given. There is no need to gamble with your safety. Cao Kui stood up to see the guests off, shook his head and sighed, if it can save money and eliminate disasters, Cao will naturally not want to trouble Mr. His Who. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. Su Buling didn't say much. He and Ning Yuhi walked out of the Cao family's stronghold and went to several villages near Zhuangzi to find Ning Qingyi's place to stay. Ning Yuhi looked calm and silent in the living room. Now when he went out, he couldn't help it. He walked under Su Buling's oil paper umbrella and frowned. Your Majesty, Song Ying turns out to be a member of the Cao family. I was not aware of the rumors that the Cao family was colluding with the government. As expected, the rumors will not spread without wind. Su Buling recalled the information just now and asked, Master, do you know how King Yi got to Wudang Mountain? When Ning Yuhi heard this, he was silent for a moment. After looking back at Kajiazwang, he whispered. Qing Ye secretly told me that it was Cao Qiujian who led her to Taoist King Xiu. At that time, the Cao family had already stated that they would not interfere in Jianghu affairs, so this matter must not be spread. I always thought that the Cao family had no choice but to withdraw. Jianghu, I didn't expect, but if they defected to the imperial court, why would they help King Yi? Su Buling shook his head. The matter may be more complicated. It involves the Criminal Investigation Department. I am the prince of the feudal lord, and it is not easy for me to interfere in the affairs of the government. Once I find King Yi, I will leave and let the Cao family handle it on their own. Ling do you know who is coming from the Eagle Tower? Su Buling hesitated for a moment and said softly, Sword Master Zulu. Ning Yuhi paused, looked surprised, and tilted his head in confusion. Man Zi's father? Why is Zulu in Dayang Tower? It's over. The Cao family may not be able to escape this time. With the style of Dayang Tower, it is possible to destroy the entire Cao family. Su Buling was a little helpless. Don't think about it. It's the same if Li Hanzhong comes. No one can destroy the Cao family if they hold the sword again. If they don't hold the sword, they can't stand and let people kill them. They will naturally resist when they are forced. I'm afraid that Dayang Tower will come out in full force, and Li Hanzhong and Zulu will come together. Then I can't save them, even if gods come. That's true, King Yi is here, Li Hanzhong will definitely not show up, forget it, let's find King Yi first. Ning Yuhi put aside his doubts for the time being and went to the nearby village with Su Buling. The oil paper umbrella was not very big. Su Buling might have frowned and thought, so the umbrella instinctively moved closer to Ning Yuhi, covering the white skirt tightly, but some rain fell on his right shoulder. Ning Yuhi was preoccupied and didn't notice it just now. When he noticed it now, his heart warmed slightly, and he moved closer and gently pushed the umbrella towards Su Buling. The two of them hid under an umbrella together, surrounded by the misty lake and the rain curtain. The scene was quite beautiful. But when Su Buling noticed it, his eyes subconsciously looked at the oil paper umbrella in Ning Yuhi's hand. Ning Yuhi naturally noticed Su Buling's gaze, looked down, and her calm cheeks stiffened slightly, blushed a little, and then quickly faded. She quietly opened the umbrella, moved a little further away, and walked ahead on her own. Thanks to the big boss Wang Qingchen for the reward. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 368. Junshan Island covers a large area. It is said that Emperor Shun's two concubines, Yihuang and Anvying, were buried here. There are large areas of Xiangfei bamboo on it, which is also the origin of Xiao Xiang'er's name. It was just raining heavily, and Xiao Xiang'er didn't want to show up in front of outsiders, so she didn't mean to come to visit. Su Buling and Ning Yuhi swore an oath of brotherhood and searched on Junshan Island. Unknowingly, they walked to Xiangfei's mausoleum. The legend was too old, and all they saw was a small earthen hill. It was unknown whether they were buried here. Under the rain, men and women held two oil paper umbrellas and walked quietly through the road in the bamboo forest, one in front and one behind, occasionally talking a few words, and then looking left and right, just like a young man and his wife who came out to play. In the depths of the bamboo forest, Ning King Yi, wearing a straw raincoat and hiding among the bamboo leaves, watched two familiar figures walking in the distance. Her hands tightened a little involuntarily, and there was obviously some longing in her cold eyes. She opened her mouth to call out, but she thought about it and held back. Ning Qingyi grew up with Ning Yuhi. The two lived in Changqing Temple for 10 years without fighting with the world. From learning to read and write to teaching martial arts, they lived together day and night and depended on each other. When she was a child, she was afraid to stay in the mountains, and her master always held her to sleep. She had a deep affection for her master. After losing her parents, Ning Qingyi regarded her master as her only relative in the world. She also thought about living a peaceful life with her master in the beautiful small Taoist temple. But she and her master knew that this was impossible, and the peaceful days would be broken one day. Her mother died at the hands of the wolf guards, and this revenge must be avenged. Li Hansheng was the culprit of all this and must die. Ning Qingyi has not forgotten the despair of her mother's death that night. Someone must pay the price for her mother's suffering. Although her master became a Taoist monk and stayed away from the world and the rivers and lakes, she knew that her master had never let go of the hatred of the Tang family and never thought of hiding in the Taoist temple to live a miserable life. Since the day they went to Changqing Mountain, the master and the apprentice have been practicing martial arts day and night, trying their best to become stronger. They have never told each other the purpose of practicing martial arts, but they all know it. Slowly, she grew up. A year ago, she learned that her mother's sword appeared in Chang'an City, so she went to Chang'an privately without asking for the master's permission. This may be the longest separation from the master. It is true that Ning Qingyi misses her very much, but sooner or later there will be a time to separate. Now she has gradually adapted to it. Her feelings for the master have not diminished at all, but she has to walk the next road by herself. Just like Ning Yuhe wanted to learn Zhu Manzi's killer after seeing her, Ning Qingyi would naturally try her best to fight for it after hearing the news that she could become stronger. However, coming to Junshan Island is not only to find the rumored Tongtian treasure book, but more importantly to repay the favor. When she was a child, she was helped by the Cao family. Now that the Cao family is in trouble, she will naturally have no hesitation. Even if the Cao family refuses, she will still stay here. These grievances were her private affairs and had nothing to do with her master, so she had not shown up, not wanting her master to get involved. As for the young man in white next to her master, amid the dense bamboo leaves, Ning Qingyi looked at the handsome young man in the distance, and inadvertently recalled the forced kiss in the alley. Until now, she still hadn't figured out why she didn't poke a hole in the pervert's body, but stood there stupidly for him to bite. But things were over after all, and Ning Qingyi had let it go long ago. Su Buling saved her life, and now he was her junior brother, so naturally she wouldn't bother Su Buling again. Su Buling was the prince of a vassal king, and Ning Qingyi was now dealing with Jianghu affairs, so she didn't want to drag Su Buling into it. Although she knew that Su Buling's status and position might help Cao's family, Jianghu's affairs should be solved by Jianghu's methods. If the court was dragged into it, everything would be distorted. Ning Qingyi thought seriously for a long time, until the two figures disappeared at the end of his sight, then he blinked, landed on the ground, and disappeared into the bamboo forest alone. In the Cao's ancestral home, with the sudden visit of Prince Su, the atmosphere changed a little. Jianghu people are all shrewd people. If they say they have retired from Jianghu, it is impossible for them to really become farmers. Their ability to judge the situation has not diminished at all. After Cao Kui saw Su Buling off, he came to the ancestral hall behind the Cao family alone. The Cao family has been passed down for hundreds of years. The ancestral tablets enshrined in the ancestral hall are difficult to count at a glance. On the high platform in front of the tablets, there are more than 10 famous swords, all of which are the swords of the Cao family's successive heads. The one in the middle is the famous sword Zanlu, which is recorded in history books. A string of sword tassels hangs on the hilt, and the jade buckle is emerald green and transparent, reflecting a faint light under the candle light. There is a futon on the ground in front of the sword, and an old man in his 60s sits cross-legged on it, wearing an ordinary black cloth robe. The sharp corners of his eyes can still vaguely see the demeanor when he dominated the world. Cao Kui closed the door of the ancestral hall, came to his eldest brother, and whispered. The Prince of Su has left, asking about Ning Qingyi's whereabouts, and twice told us to be careful of the Eagle Tower. Judging from his words, he may know who is coming and thinks that my CAO family has no chance of winning. Sitting on the futon is CAO Kyujian, the current head of the CAO family. 10 years ago, when heroes were everywhere, CAO Kyujian's martial arts were not as good as Zhu Zhoushan, Sidu Yuejin and other top heroes, so he was not well known and was rarely mentioned by storytellers. However, CAO Kyujian's martial arts were not good enough for his position as the head of the CAO family, and he was not as good as the heroes of his ancestors. In terms of martial arts, he was able to take charge of the Junshan CAO family, so he was at least at the same level as Zhu Zhoushan and others, and was one of the top few in the martial arts world. Cao Kyujian kept staring at the string of sword spikes. Hearing his brother's voice, his slightly old face became a little more desolate. The father's hatred is avenged by the son, the father's debt is paid by the son, the grievances are endless, and there is never a clear answer. This disaster will come sooner or later. Since Dainglu dares to come here, it must be a lion fighting a rabbit, and he will definitely eat me. The Cao family's certainty : The second master, Cao Kui, stood behind him and looked at the string of sword spikes. If someone comes to your door, if you really go to the government can't take care of it. You can't just stand and let people kill you. This string of sword spikes can be given to Dainglu, which will save them from asking for it. Cao Kyujian let out a long sigh. The reason for attacking Yinglu is not just for the sword spike. I haven't done anything for so long because I was waiting. My head alone can't repay the grievances I owed back then. Slow down and give Dainglu some face, but you can't give me anything you want. The hierarchy and rules in the world are all based on the sword in your hand. Without a sword in your hand, your face is worth a lot of money. Dainglu doesn't care about my Cao family at all. After all, we are Jianghu people. Since we can't retreat, we really can't re-enter the Jianghu. The Chu land is still decided by my Cao family. The head of the family, Cao Kyujian, shook his head. Since Cao Ying surrendered to the imperial court, my Cao family is no longer a member of the Jianghu family. I can still survive after withdrawing from the Jianghu. If I hold the sword, there will be more than one Dainglu who comes to kill me. The detective department has killed no matter how many people. My Cao family has to share in their vengeance. It's my fault, no one can blame them. Cao Kui frowned and thought for a long time. How about simply joining the imperial court? The Cao family's heritage is still there, and their status is higher than that of Tang Xiao. Don't mention this matter again. The second head of the family, Cao Kui, hesitated for a moment, but could only sigh softly, turned around and left the Cao family ancestral hall. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 369. From early morning to dusk, Su Buling had been searching for where Ning Qingyi might be hiding on Junshan Island. Naturally, he found nothing. He found nothing. On the other side, on the long street near the lake, 4 men walked out of Yueyang Tower and dispersed. Chang Shijian led a burly middle-aged man towards the ferry back from Junshan Island. Yang Tuyu, wearing the outfit of an escort, quickly returned to Yang Ji's shop with an oil paper umbrella, went to the bedroom in the backyard, and took down the package from the cabinet. For a family of 3, the bedroom is not very big. There is a baby cradle in the corner, but it is no longer in use. It is covered with cloth to prevent dust from falling. It seems to be prepared for the next child. It was dinner time in the evening, and there were several tables of customers in the shop, so business was relatively busy. Meng Hua, who was busy in the kitchen, noticed someone entering the backyard. She walked out of the kitchen and took a look. She saw her husband packing things next to the table and said softly, "Ms. Sir, why are you back so early today? Do you want to go out?" When Yang Tuyu heard the footsteps, he covered the night clothes inside the package and said casually, "The escort agency has something to do. I have to go out in the evening. You don't have to leave food for me. You can take the girl and go to bed early." Meng Hua hesitated for a moment, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked into the room. "What's going on? You don't know how to fight with people, do you?" Yang Tuyu shook his head, "It's just a small matter." After saying that, he put the package on his back and prepared to go out with the knife in his hand. However, he just took 2 steps and his wrist was pulled. "Ms. Sir." Meng Hua pulled Yang Tuyu and dissuaded her softly, "Let's live a peaceful life. Let's not talk about fighting. What if we get injured? The girl is still young." Yang Tuyu frowned and turned around, "After all, I am a Jianghu person. Something happened to my family back then, so I was forced to open a small shop here incognito. There are no Jianghu people who won't take action. I have my own sense of propriety." Then continue to turn around. Meng Hua didn't let go and stood in front of Yang Tuyu, "Don't go. What happened back then is in the past. It's not easy to settle down anonymously. You said you won't fight with others in the future." Yang Tuyu's face darkened. "More than 100 members of my Yang family were all killed by the imperial court, and their houses and fields were confiscated by the government. If not for this, you would be the young mistress now, and the girl is a rich lady, living a luxurious life. How can I stay in this small place and suffer? It's not hard. The store is a bit small and life is pretty good. My husband, it's better not to go there. How much money can you make?" Nagging, just not giving way. Yang Tuyu made an appointment and couldn't delay. He was a little annoyed at the moment. Men do things, women shouldn't dictate. I went out to do some small things. I have my own arrangements. I'm not going to die. After saying that, he pushed Meng Hua away. Walked out quickly. "Ms. Sir. Mr. Sir." Meng Hua chased her to the back alley outside the shop and tried to stay, but there was no response. Seeing her husband holding an umbrella and quickly leaving the back alley, he bit his lower lip and could only whisper, "My husband, come back soon. My girl and I will wait." No. The steps were hurried and disappeared in a blink of an eye. The boat on the Dongting Lake was calm as always. The maid escorted her to the market to buy daily necessities and fruits and vegetables for the future trip. After the preparations were completed, Su Buling could continue to set off. After Su Buling finished his business in Yueyang. As the sky gradually darkened, Xiao Xiang'er came to Mrs. Lu's room again. Mrs. Lu was still sitting on the sofa embroidering, but her clothes were changed into a light green palace skirt. Her bun was carefully decorated with flower hairpins, and there were 2 jade pendants hanging from her earlobes. Her neck was snow white. Under the skirt was a pair of embroidered shoes, revealing her delicate ankle. The skirt is relatively thin and close-fitting, with a bulging skirt and a curve full of tension under the waist, which outlines the graceful figure. Mrs. Lu's clothes have always been conservative and solemn. This outfit is very different from her previous dignified and quiet temperament, especially the bright red lips, which even look a little slutty at first glance. Xiao Xiang'er originally took care of Mrs. Lu's clothes herself, but Xiao Xiang'er also came from a wealthy family. She still dressed solemnly and was not good at colorful makeup. Fortunately, Zhongli Jiju saw him passing by and ran in to show his courtesy. Zhongli Jiju was born in the Jianghu. In order to cultivate Chu-Chu, he had an extraordinary in-depth study in this area. He did not care about the cumbersome dogma of the aristocratic family and how to be beautiful no matter how beautiful he was. Mrs. Lu was obviously a little uncomfortable, but she didn't go out on the ship. It was too troublesome to take off her makeup and clean up after getting dressed up. She didn't say anything, but she felt beautiful in her heart. She secretly looked at her in front of the mirror for a long time. Xiao Xiang'er walked to sit down next to Ruantan, looked at it carefully, and felt quite satisfied. After thinking about it, she took out a folded white handkerchief from her arms and handed it to Mrs. Lu. "Hongluan, I just embroidered a handkerchief, what do you think?" Xiao Xiang'er likes to do weird tricks and has never been keen on female celebrities. When Mrs. Lu heard this, she put down her needlework, took the handkerchief, unfolded it and saw a piece of white cloth with a small peony embroidered in the corner. Mrs. Lu sneered, "What kind of embroidery is this? Your needlework is too bad." Xiao Xiang'er poured a cup of tea. She didn't care about the criticism and said with a smile, "I embroidered this myself. For the sake of being a good sister, I gave it to you." There was some disgust in Mrs. Lu's eyes. "You can't take it yourself, and it would be a pity to throw it away, so you gave it to me, right? Do you want it? Don't forget it." "Yes, why not? I'll show it to Linger later. If he thinks it's ugly and has any suggestions, I'll let you know." Mrs. Lu folded the handkerchief and put it in her bosom. Speaking of Su Buling, she remembered her current makeup and stood up. "Xiang'er, help me put my hair back. When Linger comes back later, she will see me dressed like this." Xiao Xiang'er had finally managed to dress Madame Lu up as a foxy woman, so naturally she would not let Madame Lu change her clothes back. She raised her hand and pressed Madame Lu's shoulder. "It's too troublesome. We will go to bed when it gets dark. After cleaning up, we have to take off our makeup. Let's just leave it like this." Mrs. Lu frowned slightly, touched her cheek, and hesitated. "This dress is too worldly. It's not good for Linger to see it." Xiao Xiang'er leaned on the soft couch and glanced casually. "What? Su Buling calls you aunt, and you are afraid that he will have some ideas about you? How is it possible? Don't talk nonsense." Mrs. Lu was a little annoyed. She didn't say more about dressing up and continued embroidering and waiting for Su Buling to come back. Xiao Xiang'er sat casually, but her eyes carefully observed every corner of the room. After making sure that the furnishings in the room would not affect the atmosphere, she ran out of the room, called the maids one by one, and arranged some messy errands. The meaning of her words was to stay away from Mrs. Lu's room tonight. Because Xiao Xiang'er said that she didn't want the maids to know about giving Su Buling kidney supplements, Mrs. Lu didn't care. After everything was ready, Xiao Xiang'er looked at Mrs. Lu meaningfully, then returned to the room at the stern, stood on the terrace as a waiting stone, waiting for Su Buling to come back from Junction Island. "Thank you green slave, little Lang Jun eats shit for the reward of 10,000. There should be another chapter. I will probably post it in the morning if I write it. If I don't write it, I will post it tomorrow. The prince is very fierce." Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 370. After walking around the island for a whole day, the sky turned dark, and Ning Qingyi's whereabouts was still not found. The search for people was separate. Manzi and Nightingale had already boarded the ship and left Junction Island. Seeing that it was getting dark, Su Buling had no choice but to give up the search and boarded the ferry back to Yueyang with Ning Yu, preparing to go back and discuss it. If Ning Qingyi deliberately hid and did not show up, he would have to find other ways. Su Buling took the last ferry. The boat was not big, and the people on board were shop assistants and Lifu who were returning from the market. Many people lay down on the deck of the cabin to rest after a long day's work. Some men gathered together and told dirty jokes. A few women talked more aggressively than the men, and they laughed together. Su Buling's dress was incompatible with these people. He didn't want to disturb the common people who had worked hard for a day, so he did not enter the cabin and stood with Ning Yu at the bow of the ferry holding an umbrella. After running around all day, Ning Qingyi was nowhere to be found. Ning Yuhi and Wenjing's cheeks were obviously a little disappointed and exhausted. They were holding an oil paper umbrella and looking at the dark lake, thinking about something. Su Buling stood in front and hesitated for a moment. If Qingyi refuses to come out, I will go to the Yamen tomorrow to say hello and send troops to search the island. I will sweep it like a carpet and I will definitely find it. Ning Yuhi thought for a moment and turned his head. Qingyi is from Jianghu. Letting officers and soldiers search for him sounds like catching a thief. Look for someone normally, don't think too much. I don't have anything. The weather was a bit cold. Ning Yu tightened her tight white skirt and sighed softly. Qingyi has a straight temper. Her family was purged by the government when she was a child. She is very resistant to the officers and soldiers of the imperial court and may not be willing to do so. Moreover, her martial arts skills are not low. If you really want to hide it, the officers and soldiers won't be able to find it. Su Buling knew something about Ning Qingyi's character and thought for a while, if it doesn't work out, I'll just say something and tell the people who beat Yinglu to leave Qingyi alone. Ning Yuhi shook his head. Beiying Tower won't touch Qingyi, I'm just afraid that Qingyi will be stubborn. Su Buling didn't know the details of Li Hanzheng, and Ning Qingyi had never mentioned it to him. He was slightly surprised when he heard this. Qingyi is still related to Dainglu. Ning Yuhi sighed, hesitated, and finally said, Li Hanzheng is Qingyi's biological father. At that time, Qingyi's mother Pei Yun committed a crime and was arrested by the court and hid in a mountain stronghold in Shu. Li Hanzheng ran to the capital to think about it, seeking an official position. Later, when Tai Ying hunted the deer, the village was surrounded by the government, and Li Hanzheng did not come back. Pei Yun was killed by the government in order to send Qingyi out. From then on, Li Hanzheng's temperament changed drastically. They turned against each other and never reunited, but after all, he is Qingyi's biological father, so he will definitely not do anything to Qingyi. After Su Buling listened quietly, she felt something was wrong. Manzi and her father were at least second in command when they entered Eagle Tower. Li Hanzheng is the leader of Dainglu, and countless gangsters obey his orders. Now his relationship with Zhu Manzi and Ning Qingyi is unclear. If one day Li Hanzheng and Zhu Liuyi jointly raise a banner to rebel, wouldn't his son-in-law be forced into a pirate ship? After a long time of work, is it still my people who are attacking Yinglu? Qingyi hates Li Han so much that she has long since severed the relationship between father and daughter and even changed her surname to mine. Su Buling frowned slightly. It was said that the relationship between father and daughter was severed, but the court did not recognize this. The 9 implicated clans didn't care whether you were expelled from the family, as long as they were related by blood. Even if they didn't know each other, they would still be cut off, let alone father and daughter. If Li Hanzheng and Zhu Liujian took up the banner of rebellion, the court would investigate carefully and find that both of their sons-in-law were the princes of Prince Su. The court would not listen to his explanation. On his head, and then Songjika cut off the feudal clan with a knife, he couldn't hand over Manzi and Qingyi to clear the relationship. Thinking of this, Su Buling rubbed his eyebrows and felt a headache. This matter is a bit troublesome. We have to find a way to distance ourselves from Dainglu. If someone brings this matter out, something big will happen. Ning Yuhi knew the stakes of this matter and comforted her softly. Not many people know about this matter. I only say that Qingyi is a wild girl I picked up. I'm afraid that Li Hanzheng will take advantage of this relationship. With his reputation as a poisonous man, he may not be able to do such a thing. When the time comes that he points out the relationship between me and Qingyi, the court will definitely hold him accountable. I can't arrest Qingyi. In order to prove one's innocence, not arresting him is tantamount to openly defying the emperor's name. Ning Yuhi frowned. Although Li Hanzheng's methods are ruthless, he is also seeking revenge for his dead wife. He shouldn't even use Qingyi's safety to coerce you, right? It's important to be on guard against others, who knows? Su Buling sighed and said no more. Ning Yu he pursed his lips, but he didn't know how to deal with this troublesome relationship. He could only stand next to Su Buring and think with him. Soon, the ferry docked at the pier, and the Lifu store clerks got off the boat one after another. Su Buling and Ning Yu walked along the small street, passed through the house where Lifu and the boatman lived, and turned back to the boat on the lakeside. The night wind is cold and drizzle. The ferry is located on the edge and mainly transports tourists and goods nearby. The surrounding houses are also inhabited by poor families. In the night, the lights were dim and there were constant noises. There were laughter and curses coming from the gambling house bars. Some men who had lost completely were thrown out of the gambling stalls and thrown into the muddy streets. There were also ordinary-looking women with half-undressed clothes leaning against their backs. In front of the wine shop, he looked around to look at the suitable rich man. When walking through a place like this, both the master and the disciple naturally looked at each other intently. However, the sound insulation effect of the hook rails on the bottom floor was not very good. The two of them had good ears and eyes. They could obviously hear the snap, bang, 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 and the sounds of men and women in the hook rails. Respite. Don't be like this. Su Buletinling's eyes were always pure and unmoved, but Ning Yu he was not so enthusiastic. Even if he was a monk, he could not pretend to be indifferent. His face turned red imperceptibly, and he walked over quickly. Su Buling looked at his silly Badian master, feeling a little funny in his heart, but he didn't feel bad about it. He walked side by side with Ning Yu through the small market and stepped onto a stone arch bridge. There are no houses at either end of the stone bridge, and there is a raging river below. There is no one in front or behind, and the road can only be identified by the faint light from the street market in the distance. Ning Yu he was definitely not afraid of the dark, but he had just heard the sound in the hook fence. There was something wrong with the atmosphere when a man and a woman were alone together. Ning Yu he thought for a while and introduced. When it doesn't rain, the scenery here is very beautiful. The last time Man Zi and I came here, we saw many young people playing here. Before he finished speaking, Ning Yu he found that the apprentice beside him stopped on the arch bridge. Ning Yu he stopped on the stone arch bridge and looked back and forth. There was no one around, and he felt something was wrong. What's wrong? Su Buring said nothing. Ning Yu he wanted to look around, but found that the always polite apprentice suddenly pulled her into a bear hug. Ling don't be like this.